Have you ever noticed how the story you tell changes just a little bit depending on who's listening? Well, today we're going to explore this really fascinating idea that maybe these conversations we have with other people are actually deep down conversations we're having with ourselves. We are diving right into the power of something called reflexivity.
So let's start with you. Seriously, think about a story you tell about yourself. Maybe it's how you met your partner or that crazy thing that happened at work. Now, how does that story sound when you tell it to your best friend versus, say, your boss or a total stranger? That little shift, that change in tone or detail, that's exactly what we're talking about today.
All right, so to really get a handle on this, we're going to follow the journey of one researcher who did something pretty radical. She turned the lens away from her subjects and pointed it right back at herself. Let's see what happened.
So, meet researcher Leanne Kutcher. She's the one who had this big aha moment. She realized that to actually understand the stories people were telling her, she had to first understand how her own identity, her age, her background, her whole vibe, was shaping the conversation from the get-go.
And this brings us to the big idea, reflexivity. Now, it sounds a little academic, I know, but trust me, it's pretty simple. It's basically like looking in a mirror during a conversation. It's just admitting that, hey, we're not blank slates. Who we are, our history, our biases, everything colors what we see and how other people react to us. And this was a huge shift in thinking. The old school way of doing research was all about being objective, right? Like a fly on the wall, totally invisible. But this new reflexive way says, nope, that's impossible. You, the researcher, are always part of the story. And if you just embrace that, you get a much, much deeper understanding. Okay, so enough theory. What does this actually look like in the real world? Let's check out Kutcher's first project, where she was what you'd call an insider. So in this first study, she was interviewing older women about their careers. And guess what? She was an older working woman herself. So she wasn't some outsider looking in with a clipboard. She was part of the club. She got it.
And here is a perfect tiny example of how that worked. During an interview, a woman named Gloria just casually mentions her age.
And Leanne's response isn't cold or clinical. It's not, please elaborate on that data point. It's just a genuine human reaction, a compliment. And in that moment, something real happens between them. And this is the magic of it right here. That tiny little moment, that "you look fabulous," probably did more to build trust than any formal interview question could. It created what she called an unspoken bond, and that's what let the real, honest stories come out. Okay, but that's what happens when you fit in. What about when you really, really don't? Kutcher's next project shows us the other side of the coin, and it is a world apart. For her next piece of fieldwork, she went about as far away from her life in Sydney as she could get. 4,000 kilometers away, to be exact, in a remote indigenous community. We're talking a totally different culture, a different language, a different way of being in the world. And just like that, everything flipped. She went from being the comfortable insider to being, without a doubt, a total outsider. In her journal, she used this amazing Australian phrase to describe how she felt. She said she felt like a shag on a rock. A shag is a kind of seabird, so just picture it. One lone bird on a rock in the middle of the ocean, totally isolated and exposed. It's such a perfect way to describe feeling completely and utterly out of place. And this experience, it forced her to face some really hard things. It wasn't just about feeling lonely. It made her see this massive gap, this chasm between her world and theirs. And she realized she had to start unlearning a lot of her own assumptions, her own privilege, just to even start a conversation.
But it's her final project that, well, this is where the journey takes a turn that changes everything. She encounters a story so incredibly powerful, it ends up changing her own. So she started working with a woman named Bigali. Bigali was a survivor of Australia's stolen generations, a time when Indigenous children were forcibly taken from their families. Bigali was taken from her mother when she was only 4 years old. I mean, just imagine the trauma of that.
And as Leanne sat there and listened to this incredibly painful, personal story, something inside her just shifted. It wasn't about research anymore. Bigali's story acted like a mirror, and it forced Leanne to turn around and look at her own family, her own history, her own identity as a non-Indigenous Australian. And then came this absolutely stunning revelation. She wrote that because of Bigali's story, she started digging into her own past and discovered that she too had an Indigenous ancestor. And this discovery just completely shook her sense of who she was.
Suddenly, Begali's story and her story were tangled up together.
The way she described it gives me chills. She called it like an undoing of my research persona. How powerful is that? All that professional distance, that idea of the objective observer, it just dissolved. All that was left was a person.
So, this undoing, you might be thinking, whoa, that sounds like a failure, like she lost control. But that's not it at all. In fact, it's the entire point.
And this is really the key takeaway from all of this. That undoing, that feeling of being completely changed by someone else's story, that's not a mistake. That's the goal. That is what deep, true, reflexive understanding is all about.
It's about getting past just watching from the sidelines. It's about realizing that knowledge isn't something you just take from people, it's something you create together. It's about embracing a way of knowing that's more human, more connected, and yeah, a whole lot messier.
So I'm going to leave you with this to think about. We hear stories all day, every day. But think about it. Whose story has really gotten under your skin? Whose story has challenged you, changed you, and in some small way actually become a part of your story? Because that, right there, is the power of reflexivity in all of our lives.